Going into '93, Jordan and the Bulls had the entire basketball world's attention. They are coming off of winning back-to-back NBA titles with the chance to do something very special. They had the chance to win 3 straight NBA championships, something that hasn't been done since the '60 Celtics, who went on an 8-peat run with less than 10 teams in the NBA. So essentially, they had a chance to do something that no team in NBA history at that point in time has ever done. They could become the NBA's first dynasty. It wasn't a sure thing that they would make it out of the East. There were chinks in the armor, but they were the favorites. The Bulls still had Jordan, Pippen, Grant, Cartwright, and Armstrong to complete their starting 5, one of the better starting lineups in the league on paper at that time. The supporting cast around them, though, they were aging. Not only that, everyone had been building to beat this Bulls team for the last 2 years now. They've been the measuring stick, the one with the targets behind their back night after night, and the team that seemed best equipped to take them out was the New York Knicks. A team that a year ago pushed the Bulls to the absolute limit, with the series going to a thrilling 7 games. The Knicks gave the Bulls so much trouble because they were basically a spitting image of the 80s Pistons. They played with physicality, they had high defensive intensity, and they had the personnel specifically suited to disrupt Chicago's offense. Players like John Starks and Gerald Wilkins played Jordan well on defense. They also had players like Charles Oakley and Anthony Mason who were enforcers on the inside, and you can't forget about Patrick Ewing, one of the greatest bigs to ever play the game. This squad was legit and would actually have the best record in the Eastern Conference that year, giving them home court advantage for when they would inevitably meet up with the Bulls in the playoffs. They ended up meeting up with the Bulls this time in the Eastern Conference Finals. Passion of the Weesh wrote an article about this series, and this little section of the article I think perfectly described the perception of these two teams before the series started. For one team, a period of historic wealth and prosperity seemed to be approaching its conclusion. For another, it appeared to be the beginning. The Knicks had won 3 of the 4 matchups in the regular season and would take the first 2 games of this series, holding the Bulls to under 100 points in both games. Very impressive victories, but at the end of the day, all they did was take care of business with them having the home court advantage. But after those 2 games, they would go on to lose the next 2 games in Chicago, including a Game 4 win when Jordan would explode for 54 points, adding to his collection of legendary playoff scoring outbursts. This would set up an extremely interesting Game 5 in the Garden, where the Knicks at the time held a 27-game winning streak. That streak would go up in smoke after an incredible late-game defensive stance by the Bulls, where Charles Smith of the Knicks would miss all 4 attempts at the basket.
Ewing for Smith. Stopped again by Pippen. What a play by Scottie Pippen. Final seconds, Jordan for Armstrong. And the Bulls have defeated the Knicks. The Chicago Bulls with a couple of spectacular plays.
A bucket would have given the Knicks the lead in the closing seconds of the game. The Bulls would go on to close out the Knicks in Game 6 at home, sending them off to their 3rd straight NBA Finals. Their opponent? The Phoenix Suns had an eventful summer in '92. This season would be the season that they debuted their new arena that went by the name American West Arena, which is known as Talking Stick Resort Arena today. Not only did they have a new stadium, they had a new look. Yeah, those new jerseys were cold, but I'm not talking about that type of look. I'm talking about the new looking roster. The Suns over the summer got their hands on a new superstar that went by the name of Charles Barkley. Barkley at this point in time in his career was a 6-time All-Star and well known for his unpredictable personality. His reputation was not the cleanest, far from it, but the Suns were a star away from seriously contending. They had a solid roster built already. They just needed the guy. And it's safe to say they found their guy for sure. Barkley was joining forces with All-Star Kevin Johnson and Dan Marley, along with rookie Richard Dumas and Mark West, to complete their starting 5. Not only was their starting 5 pretty solid, but the Suns as a roster was considered to be pretty deep. They had veterans who could come off the bench who were more than capable to contributing to this team. They picked up Danny Ainge and rookie Oliver Miller, who would play huge roles for the team during the playoffs. They also had players like Tom Chambers and Cedric Ceballos, both very capable players who honestly might have been starters if on a different roster. But the Suns didn't even stop there with the additions. That summer, legendary coach Paul Westphal would take back over the franchise he once led to their first ever finals appearance back in 1976. Westphal was already on the bench the last few seasons, serving as an assistant coach for Cotton Fitzsimmons, but not anymore. Westphal was the guy again, and he made it his mission to bring the Suns back to the finals, but this time he wanted to finish the job and win the franchise's first ever NBA championship. The Suns would finish the 92-93 season with the best record in the NBA at 62-20. They ended the year averaging 113 points a game while also setting the franchise record for offensive rating at 113.3 per 100 possessions. They would also lead the league in true shooting percentage, led the league in average three-point attempts and three-pointers made per game, while also breaking the record for the most threes made for an NBA team for a season, with it being at 398. This team wasn't just all offense though, they were also a solid defensive team as well, ranking in the top 10 in the league for defensive rating, allowing 106.7 points per 100 possessions. Barkley would win the MVP award this season, and while the Suns were the best team in the Western Conference, their playoff run would be anything but smooth. The Suns would begin the 93 playoff run matching up with the 8-seeded LA Lakers, a team they swept the regular season series against. However, even though the Suns were a massive favorite, they would shockingly drop the first two games of the series, the first time ever a number 1 seed lost the first two games of the first round to the 8th seed. Despite that, the Suns would eventually wake up and win 3 straight games against LA, moving on to the second round and meet up with the 5-seeded Spurs. The Suns and the Spurs would protect their home court all the way up to Game 6, when the Suns would finally break through and sneak a 2-point win on the road, moving them one step closer to their second finals appearance in franchise history. They would have to go through the Seattle Supersonics in the Western Conference Finals, a very capable 55-win 3 seed led by Shawn Kemp and Gary Payton. The series would go a full 7 games, but eventually the Suns would prevail at home in Game 7 after their MVP would put together a 44-point, 24-rebound masterpiece performance. So now we have the final set. We have our defending 2-time NBA champion Bulls looking to make history by being the first NBA dynasty, and we have the new-look Phoenix Suns, a team looking to make history of their own as they seek out their first NBA championship as a franchise. This stage is very familiar to the Bulls. They've been in this position for the last 2 years straight. The Suns, however, like I said previously in this video, have only been to the finals 1 time in the history of the franchise. You can tell early that the Bulls are way more comfortable on this stage early, with them starting the game off 5 for 5 from the field. Meanwhile, halfway through the first, the Suns had already turned over the ball 4 times. Jordan would have a quiet first quarter, only shooting 5 shots, hitting 2 of them, including a beautiful mid-range jumper to end the period. Barkley would start Game 1 scoring 6 of the first 12 points for the Suns. However, as the game would go on, Barkley would struggle to put the ball in the basket for a decent stretch. There was a point in the second quarter where his stat line was 3 of 12 from the field, and he went on a stretch where he missed 6 straight shots. Most of his shots have been coming up short, with him leaning away from the basket instead of trying to initiate contact, possibly drawing a foul, and giving him a chance to possibly get into a rhythm with some easy looks at the line. It doesn't really need to be said, but if the Suns want to have a chance in this series, they're going to need Barkley to score. The Bulls are continuing to execute in the half court, shooting 62% from the field, getting good looks every time down the court. The Suns' defense is very soft, not applying very much pressure on the ball. Pippen would lead the Bulls in scoring in the first half, scoring 14 points, while Jordan contributed 10 points in the first half. Barkley would only finish the first half with 8 points himself. The Suns heading into these finals were the 3rd best 3-point shooting team in the NBA. But in the first half of this game, the Suns have only shot 3 3-point shots and missed all 3 of them, which is a big reason as to why their offense is struggling. The Bulls' ball pressure is definitely affecting the Suns' offense. Barkley started the second half scoring 2 quick buckets, hoping to jumpstart his offensive game. The Suns desperately need their MVP to get going. The Suns would eventually get the lead down to 4, with them getting out on the fast break and getting easy looks before the Bulls could get back and set their defense. Pippen and Jordan would help weather the storm at first as the quarter went on, with them extending the lead back up to 10. This is especially a solid game by Scottie Pippen, who is playing excellent defense along with being aggressive on offense, knocking down his shots and attacking the basket, simply taking what the defense is giving him. The only thing he's struggling with this game is making his free throws. It would take until 3 minutes and 30 seconds of the third quarter for the Suns to hit their first 3-point shot of the game. What's keeping the Suns in this game though is the 16 offensive rebounds. The Bulls are playing good defense, but they're struggling to keep the Suns off the boards. To help put this into perspective of how this game is going, the Bulls in the playoffs so far have allowed 74 shot attempts on average for their opponents for the entire game. After 3 quarters, the Suns have a ridiculous 71 shot attempts already, which is a testament to their commitment to controlling the glass. To start the fourth though, Jordan would start to look for his shot a little bit more, scoring on back-to-back possessions. The cool thing about Jordan at this point in his career is when you watch these games, you could tell he mastered the concept of picking his spots and when to score throughout the game. He was getting his shots, but there is more than enough room for his teammates to get theirs. The unsung hero of this game so far for the Bulls, I can't emphasize enough, is Scott Williams, who off the bench has what I thought was 13 rebounds while watching the broadcast, but on the post-game stat sheet it said he ended up with 10 rebounds total. Despite that, he's playing tough on the inside and with energy, doing everything he can to keep the Suns off the offensive glass. He's outplaying Bill Cartwright in this game in my opinion, but the Suns crashing the offensive board so aggressively when they don't get a second chance opportunity, they begin to open up opportunities for the Bulls to get out and transition themselves. And with some of the athletes the Bulls have, you might have been better off just having them operate in the half court instead. The Bulls would extend their lead up to 8 with around 3 minutes left in the game. A BJ Armstrong corner 3 would essentially seal the game 1 win for the Bulls. Jordan would finish the game with 31 points, 14 of his 31 would come in the fourth quarter. Barkley would finish with 21 points, shooting 9 of 25 from the field. A player who I really felt let the team down in game 1 was Kevin Johnson, who only shot 4 of 13 from the field and just scored 11 points. He was surprisingly outplayed by the Bulls starting point guard BJ Armstrong, who shot 5 of 9 from the field himself, scoring 16 points and knocking down 3 3-pointers. Armstrong would take the challenge to KJ in game 1. It's only been one game, but this is an interesting matchup that caught my eye while watching game 1. At the beginning of game 2, Horace Grant would pick up 2 fouls quick, which hurt the Bulls immensely with his matchup being Barkley. Jackson would elect to leave Grant in the game, hoping that he wouldn't pick up his third foul by switching the matchups with Pippen now guarding Barkley and Grant moving to guard Richard Dumas. The Suns' offense would look strong to start, going on a stretch of hitting 5 straight shot attempts. The Bulls, however, would keep pace with Jordan looking for his shot early. As the quarter went on, both defenses would struggle to get stops, with both teams shooting a combined 16 of 22 from the field to begin the game. Despite the strong start on the opposite side of the floor, the defenses began to settle in as the quarter went on, with the Bulls going on the stretch towards the end of the first quarter where they would miss 9 straight shots. Despite the cold stretch from the Bulls, they would only be down by 1 point. Barkley would end the quarter with 12 points, having a much better start to this game than he did in game 1. Midway through the second, the Bulls had shot 7-11 from the field for the quarter, while the Suns had just shot 3 of 8. The problem for the Suns isn't individual defense, but their rotations are just a second too slow. Here's Magic on the broadcast breaking down the play during a break in the action.
Now Phoenix been playing excellent team defense, individual defense, but not team defense. Here they're going to double team Michael Jordan, make him throw the ball. Now when you double team, you got to get all your men rotating on the Phoenix Suns, where they don't rotate to Scott Williams and they give up an easy layup. So you gotta rotate, get good team defense.
The Bulls are also making an extra pass to get the easier shot, while the Suns on the other end of the floor are taking really tough shots in my opinion. The lead has ballooned up to 14 during this run in the second, with the Bulls hitting their last 9 straight shots. Barkley would do all he could in this quarter to weather the storm and keep the Suns in this game. He would score 13 points in the period by himself, getting his total up to 25 at the end of the half, and the Suns would get the lead down to 6. Jordan would end the half with 19 points, playing a very solid first half, scoring and creating scoring opportunities for his teammates as well. To begin the third quarter, Tom Chambers would be on the floor to start the second half for Mark West. The Suns head coach Paul Westphal opted to put more offense on the floor, and Tom would make his presence known, helping to cut the Bulls' lead down to 1 point early in the third quarter. The Suns would actually cut the lead down to 1 multiple times this quarter, but it seemed like every time the Suns would get into a position to take the lead from the Bulls this quarter, the Bulls would respond with a run of their own. After cutting the lead down to 1 with 7 minutes left to go in the quarter, the Bulls would respond with a beautiful mid-range jumper from Jordan. Then the very next possession, BJ Armstrong would get the ball from a block and hit a nice pull-up jumper. Then on the next possession, Armstrong would hit a deep corner jumper with his foot on the line, but that 1 point lead has already been pushed back up to 7. Then on the very next possession after that, Pippen would get the ball on a beautiful pass from Jordan to get an and-1, pushing the lead now to double digits. Psych, because Pippen is still missing his free throws. But the lead would get pushed to double digits on the very next possession after Horace Grant grabbed the offensive rebound from an MJ airball to make the lead 11 points, forcing the Suns to call a timeout to stop the bleeding. As the third quarter went on, the Suns would go on another run, cutting the Bulls' lead back down to 1 with less than 2 minutes left to play in the quarter. This has been a game of runs and responses. MJ has struggled in this quarter, shooting just 2 of 8 for the period so far, and his misses are helping the Suns get out on the fast break, which is what they do best. But coming right out of the timeout, Jordan would get to the rim and immediately score, settling down the crowd a little bit for the time being. The Bulls would head into the fourth with a 3-point lead. Barkley would score 10 more points this period, making his total points for the game 35 through just 3 quarters, while Jordan after the third quarter was up to 30 points despite his struggles this period shooting the ball. On the very first possession, Marley would drain a 3-point shot, tying the game up at 87. And after a couple possessions, Barkley would hit a layup, finally giving the Suns their first lead of the game. That lead wouldn't last long, with Horace Grant converting on a layup to tie the game up again. Phoenix, as the fourth quarter went on, would miss 10 of their next 12 shots. Meanwhile, Jordan is starting to try and put this game away after getting the quick rest to begin the quarter by Phil. At the 4-minute mark of the fourth quarter, the Bulls will hold a 102-96 lead. After some important Barkley free throws to cut the lead down to 4, Jordan would come down and hit a massive mid-range jumper to push the lead back up to 6. Then after hitting the jumper to push the lead to 6, he would isolate on the right wing area and drill another jumper, making the lead 8 with now less than 2 minutes to go in the game. But just when you thought Jordan had done it again, Danny Ainge would come up huge with a massive 3-pointer, then a nice drive to the lane to cut the lead right back down to 3 with less than a minute now to play. But when Ainge tried to tie the game the next possession on another 3-point attempt, this time Pippen got a hand on the shot. And after Pippen finally hit some free throws, the Bulls will close out the Suns and head back to Chicago with a 2-0 series lead. Jordan would score a ridiculous 42 points along with 12 rebounds while shooting an efficient 18-36. The crazy thing about it is, honestly, this was an easy 42 for Jordan. He didn't have to work hard to get to the spots he wanted to on the floor. And yeah, he went stretches where he went cold, but it wasn't because of anything Phoenix was doing. He was just missing the shots. I don't know if anyone on Phoenix really has a chance to guard him. He's making this game look simple, honestly. Horace had 24 and 8 while only picking up one more foul for the entire game, so it was a good move at the beginning of the game by Phil Jackson to leave him in. Barkley had his own respectable 42 points as well as having 13 rebounds while shooting 16-26 from the field, and was the main reason why Phoenix was in the game in the first place. Well, him and Danny Ainge, who also had 20 points this game himself, despite the 2 great performances from both players, it wasn't enough to get the win, and a big reason why the Suns lost their second straight game at home was thanks in part to BJ Armstrong outplaying KJ for the second straight game this series. BJ Armstrong is slowly becoming my favorite Jordan teammate while watching do this Bulls first repeat. He just seemed to never be afraid of the big stage or having to make a big shot. He will always rise to the occasion when the Bulls needed him to, and so far this series he's playing lights out. And as for KJ, this was now back-to-back terrible games from a player many people at that point in time would call an all-NBA caliber talent. And at certain points during crunch time, he was on the bench in favor of veteran guard Frank Jackson because, to be completely honest with you, the Suns were better off with Frank on the floor at least in Game 2 than KJ. If you tuned into Game 3 before the tip-off, you could hear the commentary talk about the adjustments the Suns were looking to make in this game. The big one they talked about was Kevin Johnson matching up to guard Michael Jordan instead of Richard Dumas. The Suns need to change something because this series so far has been dominated by the Bulls. In the first 2 games, Phoenix has only led for 3 minutes and 54 seconds of the possible 96 minutes they could possibly hold the lead. The Suns would start off with the lead this game, however, scoring the first 2 buckets of the game with a great finish at the rim by Richard Dumas and Kevin Johnson, a much needed bucket honestly for KJ the way the series has been going for him so far. Phoenix would come out with a lot more energy than the Bulls, playing with the desperation like a team down 2-0 is supposed to be playing with. The Bulls would start to settle into the game as the game went on, with BJ Armstrong making some plays and starting the game off 3 of 4 from the field. The Bulls would eventually take the lead for the first time of the game, going on a 10-2 run. As the quarter would go on, the Bulls would extend the lead to 8 as Jordan began to heat up. He was up to 13 points in just the first quarter, but towards the end of the first, the Suns would make a run of their own to actually tie the game up at 29. Early in the second quarter, Grant would pick up his 3rd foul, pretty much ending his first half with around 9 minutes left to play in the quarter. It's a surprise actually that Phoenix had been playing this well against Chicago, actually leading early into the second since Barkley has been out most of the first half icing his right elbow. The quality of shots they're getting in this game is so much better than the first 2 games. Barkley would eventually make his way back into the game at around the 6-minute mark of the second. As the second quarter would go on, KJ would finally begin to wake up, finally showing signs of life this series, putting pressure on the Bulls defense with his penetration. Despite the solid play from the Suns, the Bulls would hang in there with a big half from both Jordan and BJ Armstrong. The Suns would take a 1-point lead into half. Dumas would lead the Suns in scoring with 15 points, KJ would contribute 12 points as well, and Barkley would be held to just 9 points with the hurt elbow. Jordan would lead the Bulls in scoring with 22 points, while Armstrong would continue to play well in this series, adding 15 points of his own. During the second half, both teams would continue the battle, trading the lead back and forth throughout the third quarter. One thing is obvious during the third quarter though. Barkley is not 100%. He is obviously in severe pain and nothing like himself, only taking 7 shots the entire game so far. A player who has continued to hit huge shots for the Suns, however, is Dan Marley. He's been drilling 3-point shots all night, with him so far hitting 5 threes in the game so far. And after a last-second shot from Barkley, the Suns would take their 1-point lead from halftime into the fourth quarter as well. This game has been tight the entire way heading into this fourth quarter. If you were watching it live, you knew that it was probably going to be a tight game going down to the final seconds. As the fourth quarter would go on, the Suns would go on a run, pushing the lead up to 11 points with around 7 minutes left to play. The Suns are playing much better defense on the Bulls than they have in the last 2 games. They're simply just staying in front of the ball better and forcing the Bulls to take tougher shots. And whenever the Bulls miss, they're getting the ball out and they're running before the Bulls can set up their own defense. The Bulls were coming back, yes, but it wasn't because of Jordan, because he started the fourth quarter ice cold, shooting just 0 of 5 to begin the quarter, and he really has had a quiet second half overall, just shooting 3 of 13 from the field. But after missing his first 5 shots, he finally got back on track with a turnaround jumper to cut the lead down to 5. Then Pippen would throw it off of Angel's back during an inbounds play to cut the lead down to 3 points with a little over 3 minutes left to play in the game. Then on the very next possession, a tip-in from Horace Grant would make the Suns lead just 1 point with around 2 minutes and change left. Pippen would extend the lead back up to 3 with a reverse layup, but a couple possessions later, Jordan would make a beautiful pass to Horace for an and-one dunk for a chance to tie the game up. He would convert the free throw to tie the game up at 103 apiece. After a few missed shots from both sides down the stretch, Barkley had a chance to end the game after a Jordan turnover, but the shot would go in and out. With 1 second on the clock, Scottie tried to throw it up to Horace for a tip-in, but it wouldn't go in and we would be heading into overtime. In overtime, the only bucket scored halfway through was a Pippen mid-range jumper. Barkley would tie the game back up with some free throws after a foul, but it's apparent both teams are exhausted. Nearly everyone on the court has played at least 40 minutes or more, and there are tired legs on the court. With a little over a minute left, Jordan finally hits a nice mid-range jumper after going 1 for his last 12 shots, giving the Bulls a 2-point lead. But the very next possession down, Tom Chambers was scoring a tough layup to tie the game back up again. Both Jordan and the Suns had a chance to take the lead. The Suns actually had multiple chances, but neither were able to convert on their respective possessions, so now we head into a second overtime. It took nearly half the overtime period for either team to score, with the Bulls getting it inside to Scott Williams for an easy push shot in the paint. The Bulls would actually push the lead to 4 after a Jordan layup. The way the game is going, both teams look dead tired, and a 4-point lead might as well have been a 10-point lead with how both teams are shooting in these last 2 overtimes. But right on cue, back down the court, Dan Marley would get an offensive rebound off of a miss and put it back in and make the lead 2 points again. And in response to Marley's layup, Jordan would come right back down the floor with a beautiful turnaround jumper to push the lead right back up to 4. But on the next possession, Jordan would commit his 5th foul on KJ, forcing him to have to play conservative defense the rest of the game. By the way, since I haven't mentioned it yet, Kevin Johnson hasn't sat 1 second for this entire regulation or overtime period, and it looks like he has enough energy to continue to play for around 7 or 8 more quarters. I'm really impressed with KJ this game. He's finally showing up after having such a poor performance in the first 2 games. After the Jordan foul, Barkley will be fouled by Horace Grant, giving Grant his 5th foul as well, sending Barkley to the free throw line. Barkley will only hit 1 of the 2 free throws, but on the next possession, Jordan will be fouled on the drive, sending him to the free throw line. He would go 1 for 2 as well, and after a timeout, Barkley would knock down a mid-range jumper to cut the lead back down to 2. Then after an air ball from Pippen, Dan Marley would come down the floor and drill a mid-range jumper to tie the game up again with around 3 seconds left to play. Pippen had a chance to redeem himself with a chance to win the game, but it would rim out and we'll be heading into a 3rd overtime. In the 3rd overtime, after a beautiful jumper from Jordan, Dan Marley would hit his 6th three-pointer of the night, taking a 1-point lead with around 3 minutes left. Then after a Pippen turnover, Barkley would race down the court for an easy dunk to make the lead 3. After that, Horace Grant would foul out and he would be replaced by Stacey King. Chambers would miss on a mid-range jumper on the next possession. Stacey, who just came into the game, would grab the rebound and would try to pass it to Jordan, but Barkley would jump the pass and convert right under the rim to push the lead to 5 with less than 2 minutes to play. And honestly, that play right there was the backbreaker for the Bulls. The Suns would outlast the Bulls and take Game 3 in Chicago, making the series now 2-1. Dan Marley would lead the team in scoring with 28 points and 6 threes, tying the NBA Finals record for threes made, something that Jordan did in last year's Finals. The player of the game, however, for the Suns had to have been Kevin Johnson. Yeah, Barkley had nearly 20 and 20 with a hurt elbow. He played great, but Kevin Johnson, who guarded Michael Jordan for a lot of this game, played an absurd 62 minutes and had 25 points and 9 assists. He did have 7 turnovers, but the energy and life he showed this game, he looked like a totally different player than the last 2 games. This was a really weird game from the Bulls, and there were times when it looked like they were just going to pull it out. Since doing these finals videos, this is easily the worst game I watched Jordan play. I wouldn't say Jordan played a bad game. He had 44 points. It's hard to say someone had a bad game scoring 44, but this was the first time I could remember watching him and saying to myself, oh, no, he's human. Down the stretch when the game was tight, he just couldn't get a jumper to fall. He had a stretch where he went 2 of 15 from the field in the second half. He shot for the game 19 of 43 from the field. There was still obviously a fear factor that the Suns had when it came to MJ, not letting him touch the ball when the Bulls had a chance to win the game. Kevin Johnson's quickness gave him fits, and when he was able to get into the lane, he just simply missed his layup. It was something I never thought I would see the way I hear people talk about him. But just a little foreshadowing, I promise you, Jordan would more than make up for this disappointing performance in Game 4. Pippen had 26 and 10, but started to cramp up down the stretch and ended up shooting a bizarre 12 of 35 from the field. Jordan and Pippen would end up attempting 78 shot attempts by themselves this game, and neither one of them were efficient, especially down the stretch. The only player on the Bulls I'd say had a good game was BJ Armstrong, who had trouble stopping KJ on the defensive side of the floor, but he matched his scoring on the other side of the floor, scoring 21 points and shooting an efficient 10 of 17 from the field.